People with a high sense of self-confidence seem to have that ability in a natural way. There doesn't really seem to be a huge amount of effort with those people that are self-confident. However, in truth, this isn't actually the case, and there's a number of important and effective thinking patterns that self-confident people use to increase their sense of self-confidence. And on this week's episode of GetPsyched, we're going to take a look at the top 7 thinking patterns of people with high self-confidence. Hey guys, welcome to another week's episode of GetPsyched. If you've been enjoying the channel, if you've been enjoying some of the content that we've got available, then make sure to hit the subscribe button. You can also hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get reminders every week of when I upload. And if you're enjoying this video, then make sure to hit the like button. Now, like I said, this week we're going to take a look at the 7 top thinking patterns of self-confident people. Now, before we start, let's take a look as to what exactly confidence is, or what I mean by confidence. Now, being confident fundamentally means that you have a sense of self-worth, you have a sense of self-understanding that what you're doing, the reasons why you're doing it, and the possible outcomes that you're doing are all going to be positive. Now, at first this might sound great, and actually it might sound like a bit of an unattainable goal for some of us. And like I said earlier in the video, some people that have self-confidence or a high sense of self-confidence seem to be able to have these qualities just naturally. But in truth, there are a number of effective thinking patterns that help those people and can help you in developing a sense of self-confidence. So let's get into those top steps, into those top thinking patterns. And the first thinking pattern is to not get down when you don't always feel confident. Now, this might sound like a bit of a strange tip to start off with, and it might actually sound a little bit counterintuitive, but research has shown that people who have high senses of self-confidence also sometimes have elements of self-doubt. And that self-doubt in turn actually creates longevity and more established and robust self-confidence thinking patterns in the long term. That sense of self-doubt is actually needed in order to establish and sustain our sense of self-confidence. Let's put it this way, that small element of self-doubt can actually help in progressing you in working harder and in turn increasing your sense of self-confidence. And in truth, experiencing elements of self-doubt is inevitable, even for the people who are most self-confident. And our sense of self-confidence grows in how we're actually able to deal with elements of self-doubt. If we're constantly confident and nothing really goes wrong, we can't really say that we have a strong, robust sense of self-confidence. It's when things go wrong and when we experience elements of doubt, if we can continue to be confident through those processes and through those times, we actually grow in our sense of self-confidence. So my point here for this first thinking pattern is to not get down when you don't always feel confident. I think one of the issues here with self-confidence and developing self-confidence is that people think they need to be confident all the time regardless. They need to put on some kind of front to pretend to be constantly confident. When in truth that's completely unattainable. And actually taking care of yourself and understanding that at times you will have elements of self-doubt is really important when developing that sense of self-confidence. Okay, so thinking pattern number 2 of the most self-confident people is to show realism and kindness to yourself. Now, this is a pretty vital skill, and it fundamentally means that you're able to notice when things are going wrong and what to do in order to fix them. Being kind to yourself when things go wrong boosts your sense of self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-reliance. One of the main reasons that people don't actually feel self-confident in their daily lives is that they think that when things go wrong, everything is going to crumble and there's nothing that they can do about it. If you're able to show an element of self-kindness and self-compassion, you actually give yourself a safety net for when things do go wrong. Therefore, in order to develop that real strong, robust sense of self-confidence that we're trying to get across in this video, you have to have that element of safety net because not everybody's going to get it right every single time. Not everybody is going to be perfect. And when things do fall apart, how is your self-confidence going to react? How is that element of confidence going to be able to hold you up even in the most difficult times? Well, basically, that sense of being kind to yourself, of taking care of yourself when things don't go well is one of the key thinking patterns to those that are self-confident. And I think you'll probably notice that in these first 2 thinking patterns that I've spoken about, it has a lot to do with being able to react to things when they go wrong. Because, like I said earlier, I think one of the issues is that people who have self-confidence, we perceive them to be perfect in every way and that nothing really goes wrong. That's not the case. Inevitably, things do go wrong, but their confidence kicks in order to be able to hold them, to be able to secure them, and that's what we want. We want a sense of self-confidence that's robust in times when things are difficult. Okay, thinking pattern number 3 is to think about the way in which you label things both verbally and mentally. So much of the way in which we feel about things has to do with how we think about them and what we say about them. And one of the key characteristics that's different from people who have high self-confidence to people who have low self-confidence is they actually have different thinking patterns like I've been speaking about, but they also have different ways of talking about things. So for example, studies have actually shown that rewording words, dramatic words like failure, into words like challenges actually has a really positive outcome on our anxiety levels and how we perceive those failures. Simple steps like that have been utilised by people with really high self-confidence and have empirically shown to have positive outcomes in our sense of self-confidence. So the next time that you experience a failure, if you're able to reword it as an opportunity, like a learning opportunity or a challenge, in turn you're increasing your sense of self-confidence, you're making the situation seem much more positive, and you're reducing your levels of anxiety. Fundamentally, by changing the way that you think and talk about difficult situations, you're actually in turn increasing your sense of self-confidence. Okay, thinking pattern number 4 for self-confidence is to double down on your strengths. Now, the truth is that we all have areas where we need to develop on, where we're weakest, and that's also the case for people that are the most self-confident. Now, all of those shortcomings are things that can be dealt with in some of the points that I've discussed earlier in this video. But one of the key thinking patterns of people that are self-confident is that they focus on their strengths and they're able to utilize their strengths to their advantage. People with a high sense of self-confidence know that there's a time and a place for working on your limitations. That time and place is not for when it comes to executing on tasks. People with high senses of self-confidence know that when they have a job to do or when they have a goal to attain, they need to double down on their strengths. They need to focus on what they're good at and utilize those strengths to achieve that outcome. Now, this thinking pattern encompasses a number of different things. It encompasses not being scared to label what your strengths are and use those strengths to actually execute on what you want to do. Like I said, the earlier thinking patterns are there in order to help us work on our limitations to an extent and understand those challenges. But this thinking pattern is very much focused on understanding your strengths, using those strengths to execute on tasks. Okay, thinking pattern number 5 of some of the most confident people is to understand a sense of responsibility. Now, responsibility in this context actually has a lot to do with control. And by taking a sense of responsibility or a sense of control, you actually give yourself the opportunity to learn autonomously from things when they go wrong. You give yourself the opportunity to amend them, to make them better, and to learn from them going forward. One of the characteristics of people who have low self-confidence is that when things do go wrong, they're very quick to blame other people or external factors. People with high senses of self-confidence are able to take responsibility for themselves because they know that there's a learning opportunity available in them. Now, you can look at this on the other side of the coin as well, is when things actually go right, when you've taken responsibility or when you've had a challenge and a setback and you take responsibility and it's improved, you can have a sense of assurance that it was you that amended it and made that situation better, therefore increasing your sense of self-confidence. Okay, thinking pattern number 6 of some of the most confident people is that they avoid comparisons with others. Now, this is a massive topic, and it's actually a topic I've spoken a little bit about in other videos on GetPsyched. Confident people do not in any way compare themselves to others. And a lack of confidence in people can actually be directly attributed to people's comparisons with others, and that actually does make quite a lot of sense when you think about it. We compare ourselves to others at all times, and in today's society that's more readily available than ever. Just on our phones, on social media, we're able to compare ourselves to people that seem to have these perfect lives at every moment of the day. And not comparing themselves to others, people with high self-confidence take ownership of their own abilities. They don't compare them and contrast them with other people. They focus more about what they can do in the present moment and their goals in the future than comparing themselves to what other people are doing in that moment. Okay, my 7th and final thinking pattern of some of the most confident people is to think about rehearsals. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, I mean a couple of things. The first thing I mean is that people with a high sense of self-confidence develop in confidence because they do their work early and often. They don't leave things to the last minute or give half efforts, for example. Now, the first thing you might notice here is that you might resonate with this. You might have had an assignment or a task to do at work and you've kind of left it last minute. The likelihood is you don't feel very confident in the quality of your work and how well you're going to do it. So we can attribute this to this thinking pattern of self-confident people, that people with high self-confidence can actually increase that level of confidence by how much in advance they do their work. What I also mean by rehearsals here is that people with high levels of self-confidence rehearse in their minds the outcome, the positive outcome that they want. They utilize mental rehearsals to envisage positive outcomes for the tasks that they're trying to execute on. Okay guys, we've gone through 7 high confident thinking patterns, or people with high self-confidence use these thinking patterns, and they encompass a lot to do with how we think about things and how we verbalize things, they also have a lot to do with how we actually execute on things. In turn, we're also looking at how we compare ourselves with others, and an ability to show realism and kindness to ourselves in the times when things are most difficult. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching this week's episode of Get Psyched. If you've been enjoying the channel, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. You can hit that bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get weekly reminders of when I upload every Monday. Thanks so much for watching guys, and catch you next week.